The only reason I bought the waterfront lot was for the pier. My dad taught me how to fish on that dock when I was 10, and when he passed, the deed came to me. I rebuilt it with my own hands, oak planks, rust-proof nails, and a fish cleaning station at the end. It wasn't fancy, just real, just mine. Then came the HOA. They called themselves the Clearwater Bay Community Council, real professional sounding, but it was just a bunch of power-hungry retirees with too much time and a taste for control. And leading the charge, Harriet Kensington. Mid-50s, bleach blonde bob, oversized sunglasses like she's in the witness protection program, and the personality of a malfunctioning blender. I never signed up for the HOA. My house predates the development by 30 years. But they annexed the Marina, the private beach, and tried to rope in my property under some recreational coherence clause. I told them to pound sand. That's when the letters started. Mr. Owen Dillard, your pier violates community visual harmony guidelines. Your dock is an unauthorized structure. Your fishing activity generates an unsanctioned odor footprint. Odor footprint? I laughed so hard I nearly fell off the thing. Then last Thursday, I came home from the night shift at the fire station and found my pier reduced to splinters. Sawed, smashed, and dragged up onto my lawn like a beached whale. I stood there, jaw clenched, staring at the mess, my memories, my work, my peace destroyed. And taped to one of the broken beams, a laminated notice. This structure has been removed under emergency compliance action by the Clearwater Bay HOA, Chairwoman Harriet Kensington. I didn't sleep that night. I paced. I reread the county land records, my property line, my water rights. My easement agreement for the Marina access road that ran right through my land. Then, I had an idea. They wanted to play hardball, fine. The next morning, I walked out with a crowbar and unbolted the old steel gate leading to the Marina's only boat ramp. Then I dragged it across the access road and locked it with a chain and heavy-duty padlock. I posted a sign. Private property, trespassers will be prosecuted. By noon, the HOA office phone must have melted down. 200 boats were now trapped behind my gate, sailboats, jet skis, fishing rigs. Long weekend coming up and no way out. And I wasn't done yet. By Friday morning, the Marina parking lot looked like a county fair in full meltdown. Boat owners paced beside their trailers, gesturing wildly toward the locked gate. A few shouted at each other, others on their phones, probably calling every number in the HOA directory. I watched from my porch with a cup of black coffee and a camera set to record. Not for fun, everything needed to be documented now. I'd learned that lesson after the pier. At exactly 10:30, a silver Lexus pulled up and parked on the grass like rules didn't apply. Harriet Kensington stepped out wearing a wide-brimmed sun hat and a blazer like she was headed to a Senate hearing. She marched straight toward the gate, heels stabbing into the gravel with every step. "You have 5 minutes to remove that lock," she shouted, her voice pitched like someone used to being obeyed. I didn't move. I let the silence stretch until even the boat owners had stopped yelling. Then I walked down the slope, slow and deliberate, like I had all the time in the world. "You trespassed on private land," I said. "You destroyed private property. You did it without a permit or court order, and now you want to walk back onto that same land and act like it's yours. This is a community resource," she snapped. "The Marina belongs to Clearwater Bay." I pulled a folded document from my back pocket. "Not according to the original plat map filed in 1971. This road crosses my deeded parcel. I let you use it out of goodwill. But goodwill ran out the second you hired someone to tear down what my father and I built." She reached for the paper, but I stepped back. "I've already submitted this to the sheriff's office and the zoning board." Harriet's lips parted, but nothing came out. "I also filed a complaint with the Corps of Engineers," I continued. "Turns out, removing a dock over navigable water without a permit is a federal offense, especially if it belonged to someone else." That landed like a brick in a bucket. She straightened her blazer and tried a different tack. Let's be reasonable, Mr. Dillard. We can come to an agreement, perhaps a compromise. Rebuild the dock, no deal, I cut in. You didn't come to me with a proposal. You came with bolt cutters and a demolition crew. So now we're doing it by the book. Harriet glanced at the crowd gathering behind her. She lowered her voice. You really want to make enemies in this neighborhood? I didn't start this. But I'll finish it. She turned on her heel and stormed off, but the murmurs from the boat owners followed her like a bad smell. They weren't just inconvenienced, they were angry. Some of them had charter clients booked, others had fuel deliveries scheduled, and now they were trapped. By late afternoon, someone called the sheriff. Deputy Morales showed up just before sunset. He was a tall guy with a calm face and a voice that didn't rise above a steady drawl. Owen, he said, tipping his hat. I got a call about a hostile blockade. Mind if I take a look? I nodded and handed over the documents. While he read, I unlocked the gate for exactly 5 minutes so a couple of emergency haulers could exit. One had a malfunctioning bilge pump. Then I locked it again and handed the key to Morales. He flipped through the papers, then whistled low. They took down the whole dock, every plank, without a removal permit. No permit, no notice, no hearing. He looked up. That's criminal mischief at the very least. Might even hit trespassing and destruction of property. You got photos, video, time-stamped, drone footage too. He gave a slow nod. I'll file it with the DA. You want to press charges? I do. By the next morning, half the neighborhood knew. Morales had asked for statements from a few witnesses, and word spread fast. Some were sympathetic. Others were just mad about the trapped boats. Either way, the gate stayed closed. On Sunday, a lawyer knocked on my door. Young guy, maybe early 30s, expensive shoes and a nervous smile. Mr. Dillard, he said, I represent Clearwater Bay Community Council. I'm here to initiate a good faith negotiation. I leaned against the doorframe. Is that what you're calling it now? He cleared his throat. My clients acknowledge that a procedural misstep may have occurred. They're willing to offer full reimbursement for the dock, plus a formal apology. What about the criminal charges? They'd like to resolve the matter privately if possible. I turned and called through the house. Maggie, you want to hear this? My sister walked out of the kitchen holding a notepad. She was a paralegal for a property attorney in town, sharp as a tack. She'd offered to help me file the suit pro bono. The lawyer blinked. Ah. I wasn't aware Mr. Dillard had retained counsel. He hasn't, Maggie said. But I'll make sure the paperwork lands in the right hands. Owen, show him the permit records from the Corps. I did. The lawyer's face paled. They're opening a formal investigation, I said. Apparently there's a history of unauthorized alterations in this neighborhood. Your clients might want to get ahead of that. He swallowed hard. We'll be in touch. By Monday, a new notice went up, this time from the county. The HOA was being audited for misuse of discretionary funds. Apparently, the demo crew they hired had submitted invoices for beautification services instead of demolition. That meant they'd used community fees to fund a targeted attack on a private resident. The Marina sat silent all week. No launches, no deliveries. Just a lot of angry boat owners and a boardroom full of sweating HOA members. But I wasn't done. I filed for a temporary injunction to block any future maintenance projects on properties not explicitly under HOA jurisdiction. Maggie helped me word it so tight they couldn't wiggle out of it with a clarification vote or emergency session. While we waited for the court date, I started rebuilding the dock, this time with a few upgrades: solar lighting, reinforced pilings. A camera mounted at the base, feeding directly to my cloud storage. Neighbors I hadn't talked to in years stopped by while I worked. Most offered encouragement. Some brought coffee. One guy, a retired Coast Guard captain, handed me a notarized statement he'd seen the demolition crew trespass and take photos 2 days before the destruction. The best part: the HOA couldn't even argue back in public. Their leadership was under formal investigation, their lawyer had gone dark, and the Marina was still bottlenecked behind my locked gate. Justice doesn't always come in a courtroom. Sometimes it arrives in the form of a chain and a padlock, backed by a wall of evidence and a community that's finally had enough. And I hadn't even brought out the easement clause yet. That was going to be my ace in the hole. By the second week after the shutdown, the Clearwater Bay HOA was unraveling faster than a cheap garden hose in August. I'd been careful not to say too much publicly, just let the facts do the work. But the community wasn't waiting for a press release. Word of the Marina blockade spread past the subdivision. A local news van parked across the street from my property line, zoom lens pointed right at the locked gate. They caught footage of residents shouting at board members during an emergency town hall that, ironically, wasn't open to the town. I didn't attend, didn't need to. Maggie had a copy of the HOA's bylaws and pointed out that any meeting involving financial decisions had to be publicly noticed 72 hours in advance. This one wasn't. That alone opened a legal can of worms so big it probably needed its own ZIP code. But the real shift happened on the third Monday. A black SUV rolled up the access road, this one with government plates. Two men stepped out, one in khakis and a windbreaker with the Army Corps of Engineers seal, the other in a dark polo with an embossed badge on his belt. They didn't knock. They walked the now empty shoreline, took photos of the exposed posts where the pier used to be, then checked the drone footage I handed over on a flash drive. This was done in one night, the engineer asked, scanning the video. Less than 3 hours, I said. They planned it. Even brought a barge. The federal agent, who introduced himself as Special Investigator Harlan, didn't say much. Just nodded, took notes, and asked for the contact info of the demolition crew. I gave him the name of the company listed on the fake invoice, Sunny Shore Improvements, and he jotted it down without comment. When he asked how I got the footage, I told him I'd installed an old drone camera my nephew left behind after college. It's still uploaded to a private server. Harlan looked almost impressed. Most people don't think to record shoreline property, he said. Most people don't have neighbors with a vendetta and a clipboard. He left without fanfare, but something in his expression told me this wasn't just going to be a slap on the wrist. And I had a feeling it wasn't the first time this HOA had overstepped. That Thursday, I got a call from a woman named Tessa who lived in the north end of the subdivision. She explained that her backyard koi pond had been bulldozed last year by the same HOA crew under the claim it was encroaching on easement space. They'd never shown her proof, never gave her a hearing. She filed a complaint and was ignored. "I didn't fight like you did," she said. "I thought I was the only one." "You're not," I told her. "Not anymore." By the weekend, I'd heard from 5 other residents. One had their privacy fence torn down for being non-conforming. Another was fined weekly for a flagpole they'd had for 20 years, all under Harriet's tenure. All without proper notice or due process. I collected their stories, photos, and dates. Maggie compiled it into a file so thick it needed its own binder. Then came the subpoena. I was out trimming a sapling near the waterline when a plainclothes deputy handed me the envelope. Inside was a summons to testify before a grand jury regarding suspected financial misconduct, abuse of authority, and illegal property seizure by the Clearwater Bay Community Council. It wasn't just civil anymore. It was criminal. I showed up at the courthouse in boots and a clean button-down. Maggie came with me, carrying the binder. The grand jury met behind closed doors, but when I stepped out, a man in a tailored gray suit approached me. "Mr. Dillard," he said, offering a card. "Assistant District Attorney Nolan, I appreciate your cooperation. This case may be bigger than we thought." "How big?" "Embezzlement, fraud, possibly racketeering. We're following the money now." Turns out, Sunny Shore Improvements didn't exist. The bank account the HOA wrote checks to had been opened under a shell LLC registered 2 towns over. And guess who the listed manager was? Thomas Kensington, Harriet's cousin. A man with 3 prior fraud charges, all dropped after settlements. That's when the dam broke. The sheriff's office launched a full investigation. Bank statements were subpoenaed. The HOA's treasurer resigned within 48 hours, citing personal reasons. The vice chair tried to distance himself in a letter to residents, but it was too late. Someone leaked the internal emails. They showed the entire board knew about the demolition in advance and had voted on it in a private session. Worse yet, they'd used community dues to fund it. Meanwhile, the Marina remained locked. Residents started showing up at board members' homes, demanding refunds and threatening lawsuits. One of them, an older man in a captain's hat and flip-flops, hung a banner from his balcony reading, "Free the boats, fire the board." It became a rallying cry. By the following Monday, a petition with over 300 signatures called for a full recall of the board. The HOA tried to declare it invalid. But Maggie pointed out a little-known clause buried in their own charter. Any measure with signatures from over 50% of homeowners triggered a mandatory emergency election within 15 days. They were cornered. The recall vote was scheduled for the last Saturday of the month. I didn't campaign, didn't post signs, I didn't have to. I just kept rebuilding the dock, plank by plank, while neighbors dropped by with coolers and folding chairs. Some helped. Others just watched and talked. For the first time in years, it felt like a real community. On election day, the boardroom was packed wall to wall. People wore stickers that said "Rebuild Trust" and "No More Kangaroo Court." Harriet tried to speak, but was met with boos. When the final tally was read, every single board member had been removed, all 7. The new board was elected the same day. It included Tessa, the woman with the koi pond, and the retired Coast Guard captain who'd given me the notarized statement. Their first act: pass a resolution formally apologizing for the destruction of the pier. Their second: vote unanimously to release a public statement withdrawing all prior compliance actions made under the previous board that lacked documentation or due process. By midweek, the padlock was off the Marina gate. I didn't unlock it, though. I made the new chairperson do it. She came with a bolt cutter and a handshake. The crowd cheered. Later that evening, I stood at the end of my rebuilt dock. The water was still, the sun low and gold. A few boats passed by, slower than usual, their operators tipping hats or lifting hands in quiet thanks. I glanced at the solar camera mounted beneath the new fish cleaning station and nodded. It hummed quietly, always watching. A little insurance policy. The investigation into the old HOA board moved forward. Charges were filed: wire fraud, destruction of property, conspiracy to commit fraud. Harriet and her cousin were both arrested. The footage from the drone, the emails, the bank records, they told a story no board meeting could erase. And the community, stronger than ever. People started showing up to meetings, they asked questions. They read the bylaws. They held the new board accountable not out of fear but out of understanding. As for me, I fish most mornings now, sometimes with neighbors, sometimes alone. The dock's sturdier than it's ever been. Quiet, peaceful. Mine, and I'll be damned if anyone ever touches it again. The new board settled and fast. Meetings moved from stuffy community centers to the open-air picnic pavilion by the lake, and for once, people actually came. Not out of obligation or fear, but curiosity. I kept to myself during those first few sessions, content to let the new leadership find its footing. I didn't want to become some backyard hero, just a guy who stood his ground when push came to shove. But the fallout from the old regime hadn't finished unraveling. 3 weeks after the recall election, I got a call from Assistant District Attorney Nolan again. He asked if I'd be willing to testify in court not just about the destruction of the dock, but about the full scope of what they were uncovering. I agreed immediately. "You're going to be key," Nolan said. "This goes deeper than anyone thought." He wasn't exaggerating. Discovery revealed that Harriet and her cousin hadn't just funneled money through shell companies. They'd been submitting inflated maintenance bills for years, landscaping that never happened, security patrols that didn't exist. Even fabricated legal fees filed under compliance enforcement. More than $80,000 had been siphoned away from residents' dues, and that was just the paper trail they could prove. A forensic accountant found 2 off-the-books bank accounts, both routed through a defunct management firm the HOA had hired 4 years ago. The firm was registered to a P.O. box in a strip mall outside Tampa. That box had been opened by Thomas Kensington under a false name. The state added conspiracy and wire fraud charges to the list. Harriet's smile at the arraignment looked more like a wince. The trial was set for early spring. In the meantime, I rebuilt the last stretch of the pier with a bit of help from a neighbor named Curtis, an electrician who just retired from the power company. He offered to wire a motion sensor light at the head of the dock, and I didn't say no. We didn't talk much about the past few months, just worked. I think we both needed the quiet. The day before I was scheduled to testify, Nolan met me outside the courthouse. He handed me a sealed envelope. "This just came in," he said. "Thought you'd want to see it first." Inside was a copy of a letter notarized and signed by a former board secretary. Her name was Fiona, and she'd resigned 2 years prior, citing philosophical differences. Turns out, those differences were over Harriet's insistence that they rewrite HOA bylaws without member votes and retroactively apply fines going back over a decade. Fiona's letter detailed meetings where board members discussed ways to encourage compliance through intimidation and selective enforcement. They kept files on certain homeowners, flagged them as obstructionist, and instructed the property inspectors to find something during routine checks. It was all there in black and white. I handed the letter back to Nolan. "Don't worry," he said. "Her testimony's locked in. She's immune in exchange for cooperation." The trial lasted 6 days. I took the stand on the second afternoon. The prosecution walked me through the footage, the land records, the invoices. I kept my answers short, factual. The defense tried to paint me as a holdout, someone who refused to follow community standards and forced the board into a tough decision. I just looked at the jury and said, "They didn't knock. They didn't call. They came in the middle of the night and destroyed something they never had a right to touch." That landed. The jury returned a verdict in under 4 hours, guilty on all counts. Harriet was sentenced to 5 years in state prison, with eligibility for parole after 3. Her cousin got a longer term, 7 years due to prior offenses and the scope of the financial fraud. 2 other former board members accepted plea deals and agreed to pay restitution. But the real surprise came 2 weeks later. The new HOA board, now operating under a completely rewritten charter, announced a vote to dissolve the HOA entirely, not reduce, not reform, eliminate. The motion passed with over 75% approval. Curtis and I stood in the back of the final meeting, listening as the chairperson read the resolution aloud. The crowd applauded, not rowdy, not gloating, just relieved. It was over. The next morning, I walked down to the dock and found a small package resting on the bench at the end. Inside was a carved wooden plaque that read, "For standing your ground so the rest of us could find ours." No name, no card, just the words. I didn't mount it. I didn't need to. I knew what it meant. The Marina was humming again by summer. Boats came and went freely, no gate, no clipboard-wielding enforcers timing parking slots. The new board transitioned to a volunteer community association, no fines, no power plays, just neighbors organizing cleanups and potlucks. Tessa got the koi pond rebuilt. The guy with the flagpole put up a second one. And Fiona. She started a neighborhood newsletter, the kind printed on colored paper and hand-delivered door to door. I went back to fishing. One morning, I reeled in a bass longer than my forearm. I cleaned it right there on the new station, watching the lake ripple under the rising sun. A kid from down the road biked up and asked if he could try casting off the end. I handed him my rod and nodded. "Just don't drop it," I said. "She's got history." He grinned and cast into the water, line whistling clean through the air. Behind us, the neighborhood was quiet, no sirens, no letters, no threats, just the sound of the reel clicking and the water lapping against the posts. I didn't need recognition, I just needed peace. And now I had it.